Bonjour, willkommen and howdy and welcome to the FARG Motorpool. This is a vlog of the restoration of an AMX tank that we completed a couple of years ago. So it's going to be more of a presentation rather than footage so much. So we're going to kick off. Here we go with the AMX we found in Belgium. It was an experimental model with a diesel engine and had been sat for many years in outside storage. There you go. We purchased and it was brought in ready for transport to be loaded onto transport. And as you can see here in the picture, there was quite a bit missing, including the main armament, tracks, and some of the running gear. We employed a haulage company and they were able to bring the tank back here to the UK. Unfortunately, the truck they used didn't have a winch on it, so we were unable to take the vehicle directly off of their lorry, so we had to move it across onto one of ours. And therefore, as you can see, the black vehicle here, we had a winch on it and a beaver tail, so we were able to move the tank across onto that and then reverse it into the unit and unload it. You can see us here using the winch to move it across, as well as JCB to keep it in trim so it didn't come off, because it was quite a tight fit. That was on the back of the lorry. We were able then to disgorge it into our workshop, and you can see here we're just coaxing it off and we're letting it down with the winch, so it's all under control. When it got inside, then we were able to start tearing it down and working on it in two separate parts. One half would be the turret, which we're going to have a look at now, and the other half will be the hull. Now, the turret that came with it didn't have a main armament, but we happen to have here an AMX13 75mm turret knocking about. So we moved it into the restoration area. You can see Gary here is on the end of the barrel, keeping it straight and true so it doesn't go and hit anything. We made up some I-beam supports in which the turret sat on. The turret's about 4 tons in total, so they handled it quite well. Inside, you can see it wasn't actually that bad. Just needed a bit of sprucing up, but we did try and get the paint off, so there was literally hundreds of hours of needle gunning to get this hard paint off the outside of the turret. But eventually, when we did, it was worth it. Now, part of the turret was missing. You can see here, this is where a laser sight had been fitted and removed before we were able to purchase it. We happen to have the original turret that came with the tank, and here we can see we've cut out that section from the front of the turret and then welded it into this secondary turret, sprayed up, and Bob's your uncle, you wouldn't notice that there had been a hole in it. We then primed or put the whole turret into primer, and then focused on getting the ancillaries, as well as making up a rear section for the back of the turret where the little door is, where the shells get ejected into green. There we go, looking better already. And I just couldn't, there we can see the back door that we fabricated and placed on, and then I couldn't help myself, and on went the canvas covers and the deck holes, and the turret was ready to fit. Inside, we cleaned thoroughly and painted, and you can see, looking down inside here, we've got new seats in there as well. So it was all looking quite spick and span. This is quite a few coats of hammerite in here and on the floor as well, so we knew we'd have a good paint finish that would last. So now to look at the hull. Obviously the turret come off. Inside was not too bad really. There was quite a few layers of dust from the years which we cleaned off. We tried to resurrect the batteries, but we were unable to. There's 4 of them in this vehicle, and obviously at £250 a battery, that's quite a considerable amount of money spent, but we thought definitely worth getting gel batteries. You can see here we're looking at the diesel engine. So this is a Deutz air-cooled engine. I think there had been animals living in there, so we cleaned it out. We then tried to start it, but it wouldn't work, so we thought maybe it was the switches, so we replaced those. That made us look inside of the dashboard, and oh my goodness, it was a bit of a headache in there because it was a one-off. We did find a couple of wires that had been burnt through, so we replaced those. As you saw in the earlier picture, the front road wheel was missing on one side, so we had to drill in or drill out a couple of the studs, put in here a torsion bar, and then added the suspension parts there and a brand new trailing arm. You can see the wheels back on, all sprayed up and ready to go. Again, let's go back to the engine. So we needed to try and start this. We noticed there was problems with the starter motor. So this is inside the engine bay. There's the starter motor itself. It just wasn't working. We pulled the starter out. This is the state of it. Um, there was no salvaging this bit of kit, but fortunately a replacement was found. This is just detritus from inside the motor, so it just meant the whole motor had to come out. There was no way of getting it started in situ. As you can see here, we're pulling out at an angle through the front of the hull. Quite a difficult task. There's the engine. This is what it really should look like, a Deutz air-cooled, but this one has been modified to fit inside of the AMX. You can see the oil coolers on the top there. Here it is sat outside, and it took a JCB to lift it. It's quite a heavy unit. Left behind was the engine bay, so we had to clean that out. You can see a lot of detritus and oil and rust in there, so that was all cleaned and painted. And then eventually we managed to get the vehicle up, the engine up and running, and here we have. So oil change, cleaning, and fresh fuel and fresh batteries, and it ran really, really well. Here we go, just giving you a sense of the sound of the engine. Very, very slight increase in speed there. Listening to those turbos, so there's twin turbos on it. They're cutting in really nicely. Everything sounded really good. So we felt very confident at this point that we could put the engine back in, and this is all thanks to having that new starter. We started on the hull, so again here, needle gunning, stripping off the paint. We examined the fuel tanks at the back, looking at the wiring on them, and I was able to put quite a few coats of bar coat over to try and neutralise the paint that was left on the hull. So there we are, just giving it its formal coat there. Now going back into green, and very excitingly, straight on with the decals as well. I really can't help myself. New lights we sourced, so you can see all the ancillaries on the front of the tank there. We also managed to source some new road wheels, so we're able to paint these up here. Looking really good down the side, and you can see the ancillaries starting to go on the front. So we've got a wheel with cover and a spare piece of track. Again, just cleaned and painted and returned. We managed to source a gun crutch, which was great. And here we're now cleaning the inside of the hull. You can see the fuel lines there snaking over the floor. Air filters are pretty straightforward to get hold of. They're quite new, and in with the batteries and on with the electric. So we're really excited here. It's coming together. You can now see internal lights inside the hull lighting up. Okay, cleaning out the driving position, painting, even putting in a bit of rubber matting there so feet don't slip. I think that came up quite well. And you can see here we're now excitedly putting the engine back in. Unfortunately, we had to do this twice due to an issue with the clutch, manual clutch, and one of the springs had gone, so we had to put this engine in and out twice, which was a bit of a pain, but we sort of mastered it by the second time. Heavy old lump there, and not much space to squeeze in. You can see where it joins onto the gearbox there in front of you, that sort of black area. Engine's in. Now it's a matter of plumbing it in and the electrics, so we put on a brand new alternator as the old one was also shot. Time to put on the track. Okay, there they are. Quite a hefty bit of kit. We've got two full new tracks there. It's about 83 to 85 links in each. The way we tackled this was to lay them out on the floor in a straight line and actually then pull the hull over it, hook those chains, hook those tracks up over the back idlers, pull them forward onto the front sprockets, then use the driving of the engine, the power, to tighten everything up, ready for us to put in the pins. So there we go, pulling the tracks over from the back, over the rear idler, round to the front, and reversing the vehicle slightly, and it's tightening up the front, smashing in the pin and the collets to hold in place. Now obviously it's still a bit loose, you see it being joined here, but it's still a bit loose. So then we wind up the rear idlers to give us a tight track. So this was a very hot and long day. You can actually see here Will is so exhausted, he's now on his knees and he's unable to stand. after a full day of track bashing. So there we go, both tracks on the vehicle, and that enabled us to take it for its inaugural drive. So you must bear in mind, I've not actually driven a tank before, so I'm sort of in charge, really, maybe, but we managed to negotiate it out of the yard, and there we go for our first drive. Now, really not au fait with the gears either on this. We've got 6 forward gears and 1 reverse gear, and it's all a bit tricky. 2 sets of tillers to deal with, but quite responsive, as the tank is about 4.5–5 tons lighter than normal, so it's able to move around quite quickly. I'm going to put in some sound now so you can actually hear the engine, because it's a beautifully sounding engine going in, and here we go. Sun there, certainly enjoying that. So this is about our second test drive. It's performing really well. Really pleased with it. And steering nicely there as well. Okay, so next we need to get that turret back on the hull to finish the tank off. To do that, we had to rent a crane simply because of the weights involved. So we brought in a local contractor to help us with that. The tent was taken down where the turret had been restored, so we could get to it quite easily. So there we go. All painted up. Ancillaries are starting to be added there. In comes the crane. Chap who's lifting said it was coming in at about just over 4 tons. You swing it over with great ease and plop, down it goes. And I think it was about 12 to 18 bolts we just had to tighten up inside, hold that turret down, and obviously link up the electrics. There we are. Tank is assembled all together and sat back in the unit. You can see our second project there on the right, which we're moving on to already. So this was taken out for its final sort of photographs, and you can see there we've now finished it off in a lovely, what I describe as Hotchkiss green. All the ancillaries back on it, radio aerials on, and here is one of the evenings we go out, and we were starting on a regular basis to keep that oil turning over, and did 1 oil change on it, okay, again, and eventually here we are driving the tank. Sorry about the shaky footage on this one, our GoPro days, just on the phone there. You can see it's performing really well. Lovely tank, lovely sound, and job done. So look out for other videos. We have other vehicles we are restoring, and we'll be making vlogs of those as well. Thanks for joining us.